You know about that? He's upside down. I'm just kidding. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another movie review, and this time I'm going to review a great action film from the '90s that honestly, I feel like it gets better every time I see it. And this is Cliffhanger. Cliffhanger is action adventure slash crime caper slash, in a way, disaster, because there are a few disaster scenes in the film, that came out back in 1993 by director Rennie Harlin, and of course it stars Sylvester Stallone. Probably one of the wildest and craziest roles I've ever seen him in. So, try to now, of course, although the plot of the movie is mentioned here, it's a tad bit off. I'm going to basically go with Sylvester Stallone plays Gabe Walker, who is basically a mountain climbing expert who ultimately kind of walks away from the whole life after a tragic event literally tears him and his friends apart. And of course, months later, he just can't seem to get rid of the. He's just so ridden with guilt, he can't seem to get away. He can't get over it. So naturally, he tries to come back to just, he's trying to pick up the pieces. But while that's going on, the U.S. Treasury has decided to use a plane to ship $100 million across U.S. grounds. But unfortunately, the plane is ultimately hijacked by an international terrorist named Eric Quaylen, played in the film by actor John Lithgow. But unfortunately, during the theft, disaster strikes, and ultimately they lose all the money, and it happens to fall into the very location, into the very mountain region that Gabe knows very well, along with his best friend Hal, played by Michael Rooker, and his girlfriend, played by Janine Turner. So ultimately, they end up and the plane ends up crashing, but not till they realize that the distress call that they're sending out to these people, they don't realize that this is an international terrorist with a bunch of his own henchmen, and all they care about is looking for the money. And ultimately, Gabe, Hal, and Jesse, Janine Turner, all get caught up in the crossfire. And ultimately, it turns into basically a deadly game of hide and seek and cat and mouse as they stretch across mountain terrains and ultimately have to face insurmountable odds to stay one step ahead of Quaylen, pretty much. Yeah, like I said, I tried to explain the movie as best as I can. Like I said, I'm not reading from a script. I'm basically reading from memory and what I do know about the film. So. Overall, Cliffhanger is one hell of an intense movie, and especially for people that are acrophobic, myself included. And I will say, not 5 minutes into the film, we're literally given one of probably the most terrifying and one of the absolute scariest sequences ever seen in any movie that's not a horror film. And that's, of course, the opening where poor Sarah, her harness breaks, and basically that scene right there where Stallone's trying to reach out to grab her. And unfortunately, she ends up falling to her death, taking basically like a 4,000-foot plunge to the valley floor below. Now, obviously, the scariest thing about this is the fact that this can happen, and this has happened numerous times. But of course, it was also famously parodied in Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, with the opening where he's trying to save that raccoon. So it is kind of hard to laugh because and then I realized later, this is where that parody came from. Was in Cliffhanger. How interesting. But the movie is chock full of crazy action, and there are some set pieces where I kind of look at it and I think, wow, how did they pull that off? Definitely some great daredevil stunts, literally. Obviously, Stallone throughout the movie mainly did have a stunt double, obviously, and like I said, many of the mountain climbing scenes, I keep thinking, man, these guys like no harness and no visual effects, no CGI or anything. That was really them, scaling these cliff sides, which is pretty insane. Yeah, there were some sequences in the film that actual mountain climbers were kind of iffy about. Like they said that some of the stuff in the film was very inaccurate, most of the part. Well, some people. I mean, like especially mountain climbers in real life. A lot of people, some of them were complaining about. At least one in particular was saying that the uh, the bolt gun that he was using to fire pistons right into the side of the mountain to keep going. He said, "Oh, it doesn't exactly do that in real life." But that's not what. That's just what I've read. It's not. I mean, or I'm trying to talk about the movie itself, but it's something I read about when I was looking up some more detail about the movie. So, the movie came out in 1993 by. It was released by TriStar and Carlco Pictures, a company that unfortunately went bankrupt a couple years after Cliffhanger came out. And I'm kind of sad to say because Carlco actually did put out several big, hits. They had the first three Rambo films, they had Total Recall, they had Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and they had Basic Instinct. All those movies were big hits, and even Cliffhanger, which actually was a big hit when it came out. Yeah, the movie was a moderate hit. It was actually one of the top 10 highest grossing films of '93 in the States. Worldwide, it did perform pretty well. And it received moderate reviews by critics. I mean, currently it's got a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, which honestly is not bad. That's actually pretty average for an action film of this quality. So yeah, I mean, the critics were actually not too harsh on this movie, but yet surprisingly, it did pick up 4 Golden Razzie nominations. Janine Turner and John Lithgow both got nominated for Worst Supporting Actress and Worst Supporting Actor, respectively. The screenplay, which, by the way, Sylvester Stallone worked on, along with Michael France, got nominated for Worst Screenplay, and the movie was nominated for Worst Picture of the Year. Really? Cliffhanger was that bad to be nominated for Worst Picture? Yeah, I beg to differ. This actually was a rock-solid, entertaining movie. But also on the plus side, it did pick up 3 Academy Award nominations, being nominated for visual effects, sound, and sound editing, which it didn't win any of them, ultimately losing all 3 to Jurassic Park. Cliffhanger did not rely mainly on CGI. And you know what? Even after watching the movie, I'm thinking, how did it get nominated for Best Visual Effects? Well, the visual effects mainly came from camera trickery, practical effects, and miniatures. That's sort of the stuff they did on Backdraft. Because when I look at Backdraft, I'm thinking, how did that movie get nominated for Best Visual Effects? But again, they relied heavily on miniatures and practical stunts, and that's what they did with Cliffhanger. And again, camera trickery to pull off many of the film's daredevil visuals that you see in the film. So again, very impressive how they came up with it. In fact, many of the behind the scenes that's available on the Blu-ray here does explain how they did many of the effects in the movie. It's very impressive. It also got nominated for an MTV Movie Award for Best Action Sequence for the opening tightrope sequence, which yeah, like I said, very very intense. So if you're acrophobic, like I said, that opening sequence will send chills up and down your spine. I guarantee it. The movie also had one of the most expensive stunts ever recorded for a movie, and that was, of course, the plane heist, which, honestly, I dare say, that was like the craziest thing I've seen since maybe up until The Dark Knight Rises, when the opening heist with the plane. So again, using camera trickery and throwing in a little bit of CGI, they just kind of, So, yeah, that's about it for the movie. So let's go ahead and talk about the Blu-ray. Honestly, Sony did a standout job with this Blu-ray of Cliffhanger. Honestly, this is actually a pretty solid release of the film. The video, presented in 240x1 Panavision, honestly looks really good. Lots of detail, especially in the mountain ranges. It's great, but it's not perfect. I mean, there are some things about the movie, but for the most part, it looks great in high def. I'm impressed. Not perfect, perfect, but still, it's definitely one of the best presentations I've ever seen of the movie. There obviously is a 4K version, but like I said, I'm not into 4K. I would rather stick with regular Blu-ray. So honestly, this is actually a pretty solid transfer for the film. I would say out of 5 stars, 4 out of 5. As for the audio, well, it's presented in, we got 2 flavors here, English and French, both in DTS 5.1. And honestly, the audio sounds just as good as the video. Sounds as good as the video looks. As I've said, the movie did pick up sound and sound editing nominations at the Oscars, so naturally it's going to look and sound, it's going to sound great, and it does. The sound effects come out perfectly. Oh yeah, and of course, here's the Blu-ray, and of course the insert, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So, yeah, honestly, I would say out of 5 stars. Once again, the audio I would probably give the audio maybe a 4.5 out of 5. That's how good it sounds. And there's, of course, English subtitles and French subtitles. And as for bonus features, well, we actually do get a nice wealth of material here. Most of it, just about everything, came from the excellent Collector's Edition DVD release. So, now this Blu-ray movie IQ thing and the BD Live thing, unfortunately, the BD Live function on the disc for most Sony Blu-rays, unfortunately, that function is no longer functioning. So, unfortunately, for those of you that still have any Sony Blu-rays that have the BD Live enable thing, unfortunately, it doesn't work anymore. So this feature, unfortunately, will not work. If you have a Blu-ray player that's connected to the internet, unfortunately, it won't work. But when it did work, it actually, basically, the movie IQ thing would, if you were to activate it for the movie, it would bring up real-time information on the cast, the music, the trivia, more trivia for the movie. So it's like a pop-up trivia track that would work while you're watching the movie. There's also a pair of commentary tracks, one with director Renny Harlin and Sylvester Stallone. Now, it's interesting because in the movie, I forgot to mention that there's a plane explosion and there's a plane crash in the movie, which is funny because Renny Harlin did direct Die Hard 2, and that movie involved both a plane explosion and a plane crash. Interesting. Technical crew commentary, it's basically with the effects crew as they talk about how they did many of the effects in the movie. Personal intro with Renny Harlin himself. There's some deleted footage, and there's a couple of featurettes on the making of the film. The special effects featurettes, which they show how they did some of the more elaborate effects in the movie. And and of course there's also trailers and whatnot. So yeah, overall this is actually not a big batch of material, but what's on here though will be enough to satisfy fans of Cliffhanger. There's actually a decent amount on here that goes deep into the making of the movie. Again, when it comes to the bonus material, it's all about quality over quantity. And honestly, there's a nice batch of extras to look at on here. So honestly, it's not bad. I would say out of 5 stars for the extras, I'd probably give this batch a solid 4 out of 5. So, yeah, the video quality on the disc, it's not bad. It's really good. The audio, I think, is better, and I think it suits the movie perfectly. Well, look at that. On the Blu-ray cover, it actually shows him grabbing Sarah's hand. That's on the Blu-ray, on the disc itself, but on the front cover, where's her hand? It's gone. And by the way, this is something I noticed too. His mouth, he actually looks more detailed on the Blu-ray disc itself than he does on the front cover. That's weird. It's so weird. I wonder why they did that. I don't know. But either way, if you haven't seen Cliffhanger, this is actually a fun action film to check out. It's very intense, has a lot of great set pieces. Like I said, that opening sequence is enough to give acrophobics a total nightmare of a scale I couldn't even imagine. And believe me, every time I see the movie, every time I see that scene, it still makes me bite nails. That's how intense it is. Because like I said, that can happen. And I'm sure it has happened numerous times. But other than that, though, the movie itself is a rock-solid, adrenaline-fueled thrill ride of non-stop thrills and excitement. So honestly, I would say highly recommended to action buffs. And anybody out there that's looking for a good, entertaining movie to throw in Cliffhanger is a good one to get a hold of. The Blu-ray is pretty cheap. You can get it online really easily, whether you want to get the DVD or the Blu-ray. But if you want to go for the 4K version, that's totally up to you. But I would say just if you're just a guy just wanting to get the movie on Blu-ray, just stick with what you got here. I'm perfectly happy with it. So, this concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll continue to make more movies and videos in the days to come. So until then, take care and be safe.